So I call the presentation Building Cities with Communities. Firstly, just to speak about who we are. So although I'm speaking, there's a whole team that actually goes into making this possible. The team is myself and Larato Motshabi, Ferdinand Legrange, Julian Mugli, Nicholas Smith, and Akadele Chisiza, and most of them are here today. And then we also have an interior architecture specialist who's with us, Nomku Kruithoorn. And then on the far right, we have Prof. Corinne Combrink, who's the head of the department, and she's actually given us a huge amount of support. So without the departmental support, this also wouldn't be possible for us to do this. So I just want to introduce some basic ideas that we were working with in how this project came about. To start with what's sort of the biggest picture, in South Africa, in our constitution, we have this constitution that speaks about this concept of being united in diversity. And part of what that means is that we have a society that is socially, culturally, economically, spiritually diverse, and that they all have a part to play in all of these things that the Constitution wants to achieve. Improving quality of life, healing, values, justice, human rights, so on and so forth. So this idea of unity and diversity is this idea of how can this mixed bag of a population somehow all contribute collectively to something, bringing each their own kinds of contributions. So this is a kind of a foundational principle that we're working with. And then just to go through some of the governmental documents, the ruling party speaks of comprehensive social transformation that is about improving material conditions and also inspired by human values. So these ideas are very broad. They're both value-based, humanistic things, and then they're also material things. And then to look at just some other documents that talk about how we as a country and how we as a city are thinking about doing all of that complicated work. And the idea of partnering, of activating communities, of professionals and institutions working closely with communities is absolutely central to how we as a country are imagining tackling all these major challenges that we have. So this is the National Integrated Development Framework. It's a national document. It speaks of bringing together a critical mass of social and cultural diversity. And this is actually what is going to generate the transformation of our cities. So it's about a critical mass of people coming together from different sectors and different groups and cooperating with one another. Okay. This is an arm of the government called the South African Cities Network. It's under the government, and they every few years they produce a State of South African Cities report. And the main point that came out of the latest report is this idea of cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships between urban actors. Right? They really reiterating we're not going to be able to do all this work without developing new forms of partnerships and collaboration. And so when we look at all of these things together, the party document, the constitutional document, cities report, national documents, they're all saying the same kinds of things. That we have both these material conditions as well as all these values that we have as a society, and the way that we can do that and achieve those things is it has to be through collaborations and partnerships. So this is a kind of a premise that we have. At the University of Pretoria, in our department in architecture, we have a unit called the Unit for Urban Citizenship, which is all about trying to create those kinds of partnerships. The unit has been very supportive of this project. So those are the kinds of principles that we are working with, and the idea of partnerships is not a small local thing, it's actually a countrywide, national, citywide things. So we are participating in something that really all the cities in our country are trying to achieve. So I want to look at what architects call precedents. It's this idea of, are there other projects out there that we can learn from in doing our kind of work? So the first thing that we're looking at under this idea of community-based cities is, of course, the work of the Sultan Bahu Centre as well. So it has this unbelievable amount of social outreach projects, over 20 untold. You know, in our last visits, we were looking at many of these projects, at least those in the local area. Many of these projects are obviously the built fabric, the urban fabric was already here, and it's trying to repurpose things for now new social purposes. But there are places that are special places. You know, like this institution is very architectural, it's very designed, it has a really beautiful moment. One of the things we noticed was the streetscape here and all the buildings on it has a very clear public space. You know this building when you see it. The tile work, the patterned light and dark and so on and so forth, and the arches and the minarets and so on. It speaks to the street, it speaks to the public. Another thing we identified, for example, if you see these pictures at the bottom, this large entrance hallway and the entrance hallway that goes into the orphanage, is what architects would call that the threshold. It's the space that welcomes you, it's the space that you enter, and it's also a space where many things happen. So this hallway down here, we have a hall on the side, and then we have a mosque, and then we have it heads in different directions, and when you go into the orphanage, there's the house, there's the offices, there's the orphanage, there's the eating area. So that threshold space is the space where everything comes together, you know. So these were little clues that we were learning from, you know. And when you do that, when different groups are coming together, you create the opportunity for social bonds to happen, for people from one group to interact with people from another group, from people from one class with another class. Those the haves and the have-nots and so on and so forth, the old with the young. Right, that's the kind of social opportunities that those spaces create. And the last point is beauty. And then just quickly a few examples of some projects that do these kinds of things. This is a project that just in the last years was completed in the Joburg CBD. It's called Jewel City. It's many blocks that have been regenerated, but and this is sort of drawings of all the different parts of the existing buildings that were repurposed. But the most interesting thing is that at the heart of that whole complex, they put a school right in the Joburg CBD, and then they regenerated all the buildings around it. So you have retail, offices, housing, and right in the middle is the school with playgrounds and a clinic. And so at the heart of it is some kind of community heart where they're trying to create a community. This is another, so that is a very sort of high-end spectrum that's private development. But it doesn't have a financial bottom line. Even in the poorest areas, this is Protea Glen, which is the far south of Soweto. It's the most peripheral, disenfranchised area. And here there was a local NGO called Cope SA, which works with abused children. And they regenerated this public open space from a landfill site. So you have this NGO that is doing this work with children that have been through very difficult situations, and it sits right on a public space and surveys that space, and it looks after children, creates safe spaces for them, there's a library and all kinds of things. So again, it's about how do you make architectural projects that put a social values and a community at the heart of it. This is a more traditional example. This is from the 1300s in eastern Turkey. And just to show that we're looking at high-end spectrum, bottom of the spectrum, and even historically. I put this in because it's a World Heritage Site. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So UNESCO is the cultural arm of the UN, and they identified this city as what they call an unprecedented urban planning process. So they've identified that for the first time, this was a city that in its planning was a community-based city. So what you see in the top diagram are those red blocks. Those red blocks are community facilities. They are soup kitchens, they're free housing, they're schools, and so on and so forth. So you had the state that provided those things for free for the whole populace, and then neighborhoods would grow around that. And when one was full of capacity, they would build another. And with that much capacity, they would build another. So we don't build cities so much like this anymore, but it's a huge lesson to them. And these are just some images of it. And then there's also this idea of, in those models, how things can sustain themselves. So when you're giving free social programs, how do you financially sustain those things? So within these cities, you would have the big red dots, which are those social programs that receive revenue and are for free. And then you have the blue dots, which are things that are going to generate income that can sustain those other things. So these are the kinds of ideas that we were looking at. And this is an example of a local version of that. I don't know if any of you have been there. This is a Turkish organization that built a replica of these kinds of things that they are familiar with in Turkey. You'll find this in the brand. So the idea here was just to, we were looking at how to make an architecture that puts communities at the center of it, right? And the whole architecture, all of the values are circling around that they're trying to sustain. So those were some of our precedents. And then how do we go about doing this, this kind of community-based work? So our process back at the university is what we call above, below, in between. Above is to look at what the city is trying to do in Mayfair, you know. And below is what is happening on the ground when we are speaking with one another there. And in between is what you learn in that process. Below is going to the ground. So we don't just sit in kind of an elite space very far away from the communities that we're designing for. But we go into those places and we try to understand what is happening here, what are the challenges here, what are the solutions that people are doing, what kind of energy is there. So we came into Mayfair, we got shown around to all the amazing projects that is happening all over the place. And this is a map of some of the projects that we looked at. So we are trying to understand what is happening in Mayfair. And then we looked at the urban development framework. So this is the high level aspect of it. And what we found here was that both on the ground, a lot of projects were concentrated around 4th Avenue. And then in the urban design framework, that same 4th Avenue was identified as what the city calls a social cluster. So what they found was, they are saying in the urban development framework that we have found a lot of these social facilities are all clustered around this kind of area. And so in the urban development framework, they call that a social cluster. And they said this needs to be treated as something special. That we can have, we don't just need to have housing like all this, but here we can have social programs, we can have some retail, we can build higher than in other places. They're actually acknowledging the work that the center is doing, and it's become part of the vision of the city. So those were the high level, on the ground, and then the high level structure, and we are trying to marry these two. We are trying to make something speak to both the city vision as well as the needs on the ground. And so this is the last slide, I think. So what we did was, you'll see this is 4th Avenue that the urban development framework has identified as an important street. So just to quickly recap that point, we were looking at the urban development framework for Mayfair, and 4th Avenue is identified in the framework as a high-level street around which social facilities and more density housing, as well as some retail is also possible to develop around that street, and they call that social cluster. And so what we did was to identify 5 sites, all of them sitting along this 4th Avenue kind of corridor, which is identified as the core of this kind of social cluster. So that is how the project unraveled. It starts with these kinds of very broad national values and then the values of the city, and then looking at this particular neighborhood and how we can integrate all of those things together.
We are absolutely astounded by the amount of work that went into all of this. I've learned a great deal from all of you. You have given us permission to dream again. I've also had a lot of engagement with your professor, a forward-looking man, and I've had some of my own reflections on architecture. So I just jotted them down last night before coming here, and I'd like to share them with you. Okay? It is, first of all, an honor to be with you again. You are future architects, dreamers, designers of the spaces of South Africa's next, where South Africa's next chapters will unfold. I want to begin with a simple thought that you may already be familiar with. Architecture is never neutral. It either harms or it heals. And in your case, it definitely heals. The word heal is embedded in many of your presentations. Every wall, every public space, every skyline tells a story of who was included and who was excluded. I come from a time in this country of exclusion, and you have included me. So I'm fully healed today by having met you. In South Africa, we have inherited, as you know, a spatial legacy that has left a physical imprint on all of us. Segregated cities, unequal access to resources, and dislocated communities. Your visit to our center and your generation has the chance to redesign not only spaces, but relationships, dignity, and belonging. You have the chance through this project with your professor and your teachers to redefine architecture as a social and ethical calling. Architecture is social justice in concrete form. What you build is social justice that you can touch, taste, and feel. Okay? It can heal, it can connect, it can empower, or it can isolate and divide. The choice is yours. What you're doing today is listening before drawing. Real engagement means co-creating, not imposing designs. Participatory design brings communities into the planning process. South Africa doesn't only need architects who can draw beautiful buildings. It needs architects who can draw people together. You are not just designers of structures, you are designers of futures. Every blueprint, every ruled line on your table is an opportunity to rewrite our shared history, our shared story. One that replaces separation with connection and despair with dignity. But you, the next generation, stand at the forefront of something different, a chance to build beyond walls, not just in our country, but beyond our borders as well. When a mother feels safe walking her child to school, that's design. When a disabled person can access a clinic without struggle, that is design. You see, every line you draw has the potential to include or to exclude, to uplift or to diminish. So how do we build differently? We start by listening, which you have already done on your first visit. That is exactly what you did. And this is the result of your listening, of your presence. We start by visiting, which you did. That's exactly what you did, and may I congratulate you, all of you, on your groundbreaking initiative. There are some very enlightened teachers that you have. So let's give it up for all your teachers and to you as well. Real engagement begins long before you put pen to paper. It starts with walking through the neighborhood, which you did, talking to residents, sitting under the tree with elders, hearing their stories, their memories, their dreams, and above all, the courage it takes to step out of your comfort zones as you admirably did. so far. She was saying to me, she'd never stepped out of Pretoria. And here she is in Johannesburg for the first time, which is great. Respect the local wisdom of the builder who knows how to make walls breathe, or the grandmother who knows how light moves through a space at different hours of the day. South Africa's diversity is not a challenge to be feared. It's a treasure trove of design intelligence. Draw from indigenous building traditions, from the ingenuity of informal settlements, and from the texture of local materials. So let me leave you with this closing inspiration. Again, I'm going to say South Africa doesn't only need architects who can draw beautiful buildings, it needs architects who can draw people together. And every blueprint is an opportunity to write our shared history, our shared story, to replace separation with connection, despair with dignity. You are not just designers of structures, you are designers of futures. You are the ones, like us, who can truly heal hearts in a spectacular way. We have been healing hearts here for many years. You can do the same with your pen. And you can reimagine your degrees, your titles, and your careers. So as you leave here, ask yourself, what story will my work tell? Will it whisper exclusion, or will it sing of belonging? Will it heal hearts, as you have learned how we do it here? Because that answer will shape not only your career, but our country's destiny. It is in your hands. I loved this tells you that I'm in another world, it's another time, okay? World of exclusion, and now with inclusion. And now, having met you beautiful people, architects of inclusion, I call you, my heart is healed. I thank you, and I wish you every success. And in all that you seek, in life, in love, in home, in work, in careers, in country, may you find.
Share one love, have one time to understand.